Hello everyone, welcome to the Great Gatsby. This presentation will go over the important details of Chapter 1 as well as introduce skills you need to work through the reading of this book. Okay, so the first of those skills is going to be making inferences. I'm going to be asking you to make inferences throughout the story. So this is an inference that I was able to make, and what I'm going to do is show you all of the supporting details I found in the text to support that inference. Okay, so an inference again is when you make an assertion about something that isn't stated outright, but you're able to deduce and figure it out. So I was able to understand after reading the first couple of paragraphs of the story that Nick Carraway, who of course is our narrator, comes from money. Here are a few of the supporting details that support that inference. So the first, and they're all quotes, they're things that you can physically point to in the text to support what you're trying to say. So how do I know he comes from money? First, he recalls advice from his father, in which his father says, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. People with money usually have advantages over people who don't have money. Another supporting detail, his father also says he snobbishly suggested, and Nick snobbishly repeats, a sense of the fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. So here they're talking about class and knowing how to behave and conduct oneself within a social circle, which is a major theme of the book, and we're going to continue to talk about that as we get further into it. But the word snobbish would suggest that they have money, and also this idea that they are more decent than others because of their money. Another supporting detail, he says outright, and this is probably the biggest fact to support the fact that he has money, my family have been prominent, well-to-do people in this Middle Western city for 3 generations. He comes right out and says it. The Carraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of Buccleuch. But the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in 51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started a wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. So first, he says outright that they're prominent, well-to-do people. He says that they are descended from dukes, which would indicate that they are of upper class. And obviously they have some money because his father was able to send a substitute to the Civil War. Obviously, you have to be able to have some coin to do something like that. And they own their own hardware business, which is a family business. Another detail, he graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after his father graduated from New Haven in 1915. What famous college is in New Haven? Yale. So not only did our narrator Nick Carraway go to Yale, but his father went there. So there's a bit of a legacy going on. Some more supporting details. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me and finally said, why, yes, with very grave, hesitant faces. Father agreed to finance me for a year, and after various delays, I came east permanently, I thought, in the spring of 22. So when Nick makes the decision to go to New York to learn the bond business, all of his relatives have a stake in that, and they discuss it and talk it over, and they're pretty nervous and hesitant about it. They agree finally, but making that family decision as if they were choosing a prep school for him would indicate to me that, again, the family has money and they're very involved in his life. He also says outright that his father is going to finance him in his move to New York and support him until he gets on his feet. Another detail, he had a dog, at least for a few days until he ran away, an old Dodge, and a Finnish woman who made my bed and cooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. So he has a maid. He's a young man coming to New York, and he's got a maid that makes his bed for him every morning. Indicates to me he has a rich lifestyle. He's used to that sort of a lifestyle. And lastly, he describes his house as a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow at $80 a month. Now, while that might indicate that he doesn't have money, to me, I think we have to start questioning his reliability as a narrator, because he also says quickly after that, my house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between 2 huge places that rented for 12 or 15,000 a season. He's living on the water, which houses are always very beautiful and expensive on the water, and his neighbors to the right and left of him are these gigantic mansions. Specifically, Gatsby is on one side of him. So it can't be that bad. He probably has a skewed view of what a weather beaten cardboard bungalow is if he is used to having a lot of money and for the first time he's living on his own. Okay, the next thing that we need to talk about is the map. Okay, there are four main settings in The Great Gatsby where things take place. And we've already sort of mentioned the eggs. We have West Egg, which is circled here in green. We have East Egg, which is circled here in yellow. We have Manhattan. And then we have the Valley of Ashes. Okay, so this is actually a real map of this particular area of New York. So East and West Egg, that's an area, that's Long Island. And then you'll see you have this long railroad that runs through Queens from Long Island through Queens into Manhattan. And that long stretch of railroad is called the Valley of Ashes by the characters in the book. And Manhattan is where everybody works. So Nick commutes every day from West Egg, where he lives, circled in green there, gets on the train, rides the railroad through the Valley of Ashes, and goes to work in Manhattan every day. Okay? Now, where does everybody live? This purple house is going to be indicative of Nick's house. The blue house there is Gatsby's. And the pink house belongs to the Buchanans. That's Tom and Daisy. So they are separated by what's called a courtesy bay, which we'll talk about the significance of that phrase in just a bit. But that's where all of the characters live, that's where they travel through, and that's where they work. And it's going to be important for you to kind of make a mental map of this in your head so that you can understand the story a lot better, because it will be important in the later parts of the book. Okay, so here is another example of how we can make inferences. This is Nick's discussion of how he views Gatsby. And I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to ask you to make an inference about Nick's attitude towards Gatsby. How does he feel about Gatsby, and how do we know that based on the text that we're reading? So here we go. And after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes, but after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and had a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams, that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. So, make an inference. What is Nick's attitude towards Gatsby? In other words, what is his tone? I would say that Nick has an overall positive attitude towards Gatsby. Now let's take a look at some supporting details that allowed me to arrive at that conclusion. The first detail I'm going to look at is the diction, the word choices, and here are a few words and phrases that showed me he has an overall positive attitude towards Gatsby. He says that Gatsby was exempt from his scorn. Okay, so if you scorn something, you hate it, you don't like it, but Gatsby is exempt from the scorn. He says there's something gorgeous about him. He describes Gatsby as having a heightened sensitivity, so a pretty sensitive guy. The word promise is very positive. Intricate, so he's a complex, intricate guy with a detailed personality. He has a gift for hope. He's very hopeful, and a romantic readiness. All of those word choices help me to arrive at that conclusion, that inference that I was able to make. Another supporting detail, the diction again, but this time we have some negative word choices. So prayed, foul dust, and sorrows All of those things are negative, but I'm still saying he has an overall positive attitude towards Gatsby because those things indicate that he views Gatsby as a sort of victim. And there is a sadness, like a wistful longing in his descriptions there. It's what preyed on Gatsby. That would make Gatsby a victim, the foul dust floating in the wake of his dreams. So he is this incredible dreamer, but due to unfortunate circumstances, um, there's a sadness about it, and there's a sorrow there. Another thing besides the word choice, we can take a look at the syntax. Syntax is the way that the sentences are constructed, the length of the sentences, the use of punctuation. So here in this case, we have very long, drawn out sentences. There's a lot of punctuation to continue the sentence, not a lot of periods or end stops there, which again indicates this sort of wistful longing, this yearning, this looking back. Because remember, Nick is telling us the story of Gatsby after it has already happened. He is looking back on his time with Gatsby and says these things to us in the very beginning of the story. And lastly, you can take a look at the imagery, which helps you arrive at certain conclusions about the author's or the narrator's tone. So the imagery, one of the images I picked up on was he compared Gatsby to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes. So in other words, again, he's super sensitive and he can pick up on things, and he's very complex. So all of that imagery would indicate to me that Nick's attitude towards Gatsby is positive. Okay, we're going to stop here. You can tune into part 2 where we'll meet the Buchanans and go over the rest of chapter 1. Thanks for watching.